So in continuation from where we stopped at, we're going to continue from there. But I did get a problem is that I did make a video on the other parts of the authentication where I implemented the user authentication backend, the API side of it. But the video was too long for me to upload it. It was about 4 hours long for me to upload because, you know, when you're developing live while making these tutorials, and the machine I'm using are quite not attuned to video editing. I'm not attuned to it. I don't know the tools to use. I don't know most of these things. So basically I record everything and upload it as it is. But coming to the authentication video, on this part, there were a lot of things and a lot of steps I had to take. And since I was doing this live, it took a lot of time for me to, come around certain issues, like figure them out, try to fix that, and so on. So it took a long time that I couldn't upload that video. It was way too long. So what I decided to do is just delete that video and explain basic concept on what some of these parts are. And since I'm uploading it to my GitHub, most of this information will be found right there at the GitHub, in the GitHub repository. And so basically everything is just basically the same as the previous tutorial where we created our create user with email and password using Zod for validation. So this is the create and this is the sign in with email and password. For the create part, we take the email. We shall require the user to give us an email, a password, a username, and either the user can decide whether they want to enable user. That means enable the user to log in with username only rather than logging in with email. That is an optional thing. It's let's put it as optional. It's optional for the user to do that. The username is required, the email is required, the password is required. This is quite optional. You can add it or not. It's not really a big deal. And anyway, I think there's a good reason to why I might have not added that, because it's been some days. Because it has been some weeks before looking at this code again. And then when it comes to the sign in with email and password, we require the user to either use an email, which is optional because we pass an email, then we pass the Zod option, which is the email is a string and Zod already has the properties for email. Then we pass email and we make it optional. That means you can either use the email address or use the username, which has also the same structure but without the email part in it, which has the Zod string and option. Then we shall need the password, which is pass Zod, string, minimum and maximum as structure of the password. Then remember, which is basically an optional thing if you want to log in and be remembered for a certain period of time. And then we come into our structure, use Hono that we already defined in the previous video. We defined a hook, a reusable hook for use Hono, which is basically we create Hono. Rather than every time initiating another Hono instance, we can create a reusable part of our Hono with just use Hono, where we have our crons, and then the logger for us to see the logs themselves. This is optional. You don't really need it. I just did that for the sake of doing it. And then return Hono itself. That means it will return the Hono itself. So the reason why this is helpful to us is because we can define multiple things here that we would define in other. We can define multiple middlewares right here that we would have defined in each and every instance that we would use, would call a new instance of Hono itself. But since we are doing it as a reusable instance in call, we can define each and everything here that will easily be reused on every time that we call use Hono, hence reducing on the code itself. So we call our use Hono, our reusable use Hono here, and we are using the reason why I passed a React cookie. I passed it for no apparent reason because I just kind of I've recently gotten to read about it, but I haven't yet picked much about it, so I just used it for the sake of using it here. So don't mind it, don't read into it. You can totally remove it and return it as is. I just added it for the sake of why not. Then coming back here, so we call our Hono instance, which passes our instance, our reusable instance of Hono, that we can add other parts into it from here. We can add, like, say, base path or whatever that we want here. But since this is going to be used in our main API call that, if we remember correctly, is under API route in our backend side, so we are using it right here. I think we can remove the hello world part of it. It was mainly for testing, so which we are using it here with our main instance, which is defined here, our reusable Hono instance plus the base, which is the API. This is our main instance, which makes our API appear at API. That means our host plus port, or our host and API plus our paths, our paths themselves. So here we have the path of authentication, which is for our authentication, which we export here. We export it as default here and then import it here, right here, and use it in our main instance of Hono as route. And then we define a path for it, which our auth routes are going to be inside here, and our auth routes imported using use auth, since we have defined our auth route under use auth. So our use auth instance, this is our Hono auth route. This is our Hono auth route that we have in here. So we define it and call the reusable, and then define our current user. So before we get into the current user, you need to first and foremost define the two most important things: the login and to create an account, and also to log in an account. So you need to first define those things first, because they're important in order for you to understand the structure of the information that is being returned. You could do that, though, since we have not designed a structure for ourselves. We could have done that using Figma, whereby we design how we would want our API to be. But since we did not design that, and we are just doing it out of the whims of whatever is running in my mind at the current moment, that's how crazy this project is, and that's how crazy the project is in general. Because it would have been best if we actually had a design concept that we had in mind and designed all this. It would be smooth. But since we didn't design it, it would be much better to start with creating an account in the first place, which was already explained in the previous video. So while creating an account, since we are using Zod for validation, in order for us to have this validation available, whereby we don't have to again figuring out how to validate all this information, we pass a validator from Zod itself. From Zod, our validator is imported from Hono validator. So we pass Hono validator, which we want it to validate JSON, since we are going to return our requests from JSON itself. So in hindsight, if we didn't have a validator, we would be returning our instances using C from our instance of Hono itself, our request instance of Hono, and then JSON itself. But since we have a validator, all we do is we define this request path, the request return JSON right here, and then we pass in a value. Then this validator takes of the values that were supposed to be returned inside here, like email, the password, and so on, and yada yada and so on, so that all these values that are inside here, our objects, all the values that are supposed to be our objects are going to be returned back from value and passed into our crate, which is our Zod object itself, our crate Zod object, and test and how can I put it, referenced as a self presser. So we press our values that we pass through here to our Zod instance, and then check whether it successfully matches, if everything is correct to our Zod instance, because this Zod instance, when we define it, checks all these properties. Is the email valid? Is the email empty? Is the password between 8 to 23? The sequence correct? Is the username correct? And so on, all that. So the self presser passes our data and presses it through our Zod structure, that is our Zod object that is defined, and then returns the value of either the presser is successful. If it is not successful, we shall return the error of invalid input, and then return the error itself of what invalid input is actually incorrect. Else, if it is successful, then return the data itself, the data from our our data that is defined in our Zod instance, which is then passed into our, basically it's binded into our post request for our Hono itself. So it can be used right from here. It can be used from our context itself, because this C means basically context, if I'm not wrong. Yes, it's a context. So it binds that and we pass it, and then when we're requesting it, instead of defining it as a request.json to get our form data, we request it as C request the validated data that was validated right here from the validator. So we get our valid data JSON, which is the JSON, and we have all of them typed for us, whereby we have email as a string, password as a string, username as a string, and this one as a boolean. And then after that, we check for existing users. We start by checking for existing users before we can create a new user. If there is an existing user that has the information, because here we are taking the identifier, which is usually the email or the password, which is usually the email address. We shall later on create a better logic for this, but for now just go along with it, don't mind it. And then we also check whether there in our database there is a user identifier that matches this email that is being created. If not, also check if there is a username that matches the username that is being created, because since the username can be used for login, we wouldn't want the usernames to be similar, so we make sure that everyone has a unique username. And we shall also define a logic for that on the create page side. We shall look into that, and then we check whether it exists or doesn't exist, and then we return the error whether it's the username or the or the email address, and then also the information, and then we create a new user by inserting it into the database. Now the reason why we have a UID here, since we have a UID here, when in hindsight our table structure already defines for us a UID, and we don't really need to redefine this, is because of an issue that I found, whereby since we have to create the user itself that has this information, as well the account that stores this user's information, we have these two tables, and these two tables have to reference one another. The account has to reference the user's ID, and when creating, it's quite difficult to reference the user ID before when inserting that information, since when we are using the structures that when we're using basically workers, it's difficult for one to use transitional structures in the database and in DB itself, due to type or something. When I read about it, there was a lot of information I really didn't mind about or care about, since we're doing this on the fly. So we create our user ID right here, and then we press our password that is provided right here. The password that is passed, we press it and return a hash from it. That's the one that we're going to store in the database, because we don't really need to know the user's information. We don't need to know the user's password, or anyone doesn't need to know the user's password in order for them to hash it or use it for hashing. Oh crap, that's a lot. I'm feeling I'm getting a little bit of headache. Yep. Yeah, we will have to improve this, because this kind of seems a little bit off, for some reason not very secure. And since this current provider is create username with email and password, the provider is going to be email and password itself. And then we pass the username, we create our new table, and then we insert the user. Then here is another logic that we had to have in hindsight. So we insert the user, the new user, and then what am I missing? Getting user count to determine. Oh, okay. So we insert the new user for the user table, and then after inserting the user, we get this user. We get user count. So we are going to take the user count by checking the existing users in database, or by checking the database itself. We check the entire database to see if there are other users in the database. If there are other users in the database, then the first user is going to be owner. If length equals to 1. Oh yeah, since we have already inserted the user in the database, when we check currently in the database, the first user is going to, since we have inserted the user in the database, which now that I'm thinking about it, this is a really crappy logic. It's kind of dumb for me to do this. I would have just passed this itself. Should have just passed this itself. Yeah, this is a crappy logic to do. I think we shall need to fix this. We shall need to fix this. We shall need to fix it, but the logic behind it is to determine who the first user in the database is supposed to be, the role of the first user in the database is supposed to be. So the first user in the database is often going to be the owner of the application, since they're going to host the CMS itself. So the first user will most likely to be the owner of the database. Else, if it is not the first user, then the person is going to default back. The role is going to always be user, unless the owner of the database assigns that new role to them. Then we create this new account. We insert this information of the new account by passing the user's UID and then this other information. And now that I think of it, I don't know why I pointedly had to add the UID into it, yet I finally found the fix. But humor me for this and forget about that. We shall explain most of this later on. I don't want to waste a lot of time, and I think that I've actually done that exactly. Take more time trying to explain all this. And then, the user information is created and we insert that information, the created user's information to account itself. The reason why I went with this structure is because I wanted to have a structure that can permit for other authentication methods, like GitHub authentication, which is actually implemented and it does work. Yep, it's implemented and it does work, though it needs a little bit of fixing, but we shall get to that later on. So for today, what we are going to do, leaving alone this part of the authentication, I'll get more time, an entire video just to explain the authentication part itself. Now coming back to our page, which we created for authentication, by creating two things. So our backend code, we created a backend side on our compose to create our code, which will handle rather than creating everything within here, to structure our code to look a little bit much better or nice looking to us. So we have our wrapper that handles authentication, that we wrap on in our backend side admin, in the admin the admin layout itself. So we wrap our auth wrapper to handle that. I said I'm going to explain, as I promised, I will explain the authentication logic in the later time, and we shall also make improvements to it because of time. Uploading a large video is quite difficult to deal with. And continuing on, so we have our authentication page that has the authentication, and the create account page that has creating account. Most people don't really watch these videos since they are quite long to deal with, and it's a long process to do that. Until I maybe get some knowledge on editing the video, would shorten down the period. So what I'm going to do is log in. So we have the login page and we have the create account. So when I move back to the home, this is the home, and then we have the admin, which will redirect us when we are not authenticated to check if we are authenticated or not. If we are not authenticated, to redirect us to authentication login. In order for us to log in, but you can head into your create account and then you can create an account for yourself, and you can either enable username authentication or not and just create an account, or else you could continue with GitHub. I wouldn't want to do that right now. I want us to just get into authentication itself. So I will enable remember me, and here we are in our admin side. So what we're going to do is we're going to move away from their design, because when I realized that it's too long of a video for me to repeat the authentication process, I tried to delete everything in order for me to repeat and try to try to remake the whole authentication process. So I removed the shard CN slider that we are going to use. So right now what we're going to do is use another structure for our design. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to name this as bottom sheet. Let's name it as bottom menu. So this is the design we are going to go for with our CMS. Let's take this as is. We are going to improve this design, but let's take this as is for now. And don't worry, this is going to make sense in a short while. We are going to definitely improve this design. So what we're going to do is have a div here, because here now we are developing our design for our CMS dashboard, where the admin or other users are going to have to edit and make changes to the design itself, make changes to pages and so on, and manage the CMS itself, the content management system itself. This is what it is. So here we are going to have the height itself is going to be screen. We don't want it to exceed the screen from here. And then we shall justify everything center to the center, and here it is. And then right below it we are going to add our bottom menu, which I'm going to explain later on. For the page, we are obviously not going to use client. This is just for the meantime. We are going to restructure this to be much better. Then we are going to have our position type to be relative, in order for us to make our bottom menu absolute and insert it to the bottom. So here we are going to do absolute, and we are going to put it to the bottom, but at the bottom it's going to be 10 decimal place 10 dp from the bottom, and here it is. And what we are going to do next is 10 dp from the bottom, and let's remove all this, no background. That what we are going to do next is maximum width. We are going to make in large screens, we are going to make it maximum width of 7, and make the width full. Just a minute. And sorry, don't worry about that. 7XL, and let's give it a background. Let's give it let's make it a blurry background by giving it by adding backdrop blur to it, so that when items are passing under it, they have a blurry effect. It will have a blurry effect to it. So then we shall add white, but we shall give it a white of 10 in order to give us that glass look to it. And then we shall also round it off to around, we shall make it a round of large. For now we are going to improve this. So what I'm going to do next is design a nav. Going to put a nav, and the items that are going to be inside here are going to be gridded, and since most of them are going to be just basically, actually no, we are going to flow them, and gap of 2, actually give them a gap of 3, and then we shall center all of them. Most of the items that are going to be here are going to be buttons, and the buttons are going to have icons, which I'm going to add icon. So we have Lucid for our icons, though I would think of using, instead of Lucid, I would think of adding in tabular icons, because they are much better and it has a larger bucket than Lucid icons has. So for the first one, we're going to put icon. We need to add icon icon dash. Okay, let's go to table icons and look for the home icon, which is dashboard. See, I don't really like most of these icons. Overview. Okay, I think I'll take this menu 3 for the start, and I think we shall improve most of this icon menu 3. Now I don't know why it's not importing, but it will import later on, so let's import it by ourselves. And this is going to be of size icon, since these are going to be basic icons, and put in a class, and let's round it off to be fully rounded. And here we shall have our menus. So we shall have a design that is akin to this. Let me look for my design too. I do have a canvas, and I don't know where I did put the pen. New notes. So we're going to have a design akin to this. So say this is our page, and let's switch to touch mode. Okay, this is our page, and we shall have here below our icons that will deal with the main menus, and we shall have our page items right here, here, and they can go right below it, right under it, so they can float right under it, and it will be a little blur. And then we shall have also indicators for it. Where I picked this design from, I picked it from one of my concepts that I tried to design a while back in Figma. I wish it could just hurry to load. And just give it a minute right here. I just want to show you the design concept that I'm actually taking up, so that it's not just me talking out of my ass from here. Okay, I think it's this one. Oh, come on, can you speed up? Oh, gosh. Let's see if it will help me do that. So, okay, here it is. So here we go. So this is the design concept that we are going to take up. This one here. That's the concept we're going to take up. I don't know why this is here. So that's what we're going to take up. Okay, here it is. This is a nice one. So this is the design concept that we're going to take up. Like this. This is how it looks like. This is the concept that we're going to make for our CMS. I didn't want to load it because it's going to take up a lot of time to load for some reason. I don't know if... Oh, okay. This was nice actually. So this is the concept that we're going to take. This is the concept we're going to make for ourselves, rather than following the conventional method of having the sidebar here, just like how now I don't know what happened to Figma. Okay, for some reason it's tweaking out. Okay, I don't know what happened here, but don't worry. At least I can show you what. So this is what I'm trying to design right now, and this is how it's going to look. Rather than having something similar to the sidebars here, we shall have that design that I've just shown you right now, because I think it's kind of cool. It's kind of better looking than the others. That's what I think, at least. Waiting to be proven wrong any time of the day, but I think it's kind of better looking, and we shall have about, say, five parts of it, about that, something of a kind, or even more, or we can make it even dynamic, but I think let's go with this amount of number, and let's pad it to increase the height, and round it to full, and we shall make it 2 decimal places. Okay, we're going to make py and then px to 5. Let's make this 3 and then the others to 5, but as well I would want to increase this to 12, the height for it to 12 plus the width for it to 12 as well. So at our buttons a little bit bigger and large enough for someone to actually visibly see what is happening, rather than something that is quite smaller. So H12, and yeah, okay, for now let's just go along with this, and ta-da, this looks nicer than before. And in order for us to have it floating above the rest, we shall add a z index of 55. Shall have it have a z index of 55, and yeah, I think that is it. Then mobile friendly, that's that's the part we would want to know. And for the mobile part, md shall make the bottom back to 5, which lowers it a little bit down, and as well adding container, which brings a problem because remember the container, adding it into our layout itself, it doesn't make sense. So let's create an outside layout for our container, and since this is footer, I think we could just make it as footer by itself. Oh no, our footer has its other issues. I've totally forgot that it has its other problems as well. So I shall make that as container, and yeah, center it as that. I think we could pad it out a little bit to probably that would work there. So pad it to 5 probably. No, that wouldn't work there. I think it should have squeezed most of this inside, but that should be fine. And this shouldn't even be inside here because it basically does nothing for us here. So this should be here, and I just can't seem to figure out why it won't work, but it might be related to this. Instead, adding this here. we can't have it have a height of full, so that we can have it have the height that fits right there. Let's add and see if this is actually meeting up to the standard. Still not there, but I think we shall fix that later on as we continue. As well as removing this. Okay, so I think this works for us. And then the last part will be icon settings. This should be the last side of it, and let's increase the icons to 9 actually. Just make the size as 9 rather than 8 should be. Say 6. I think 7. Okay, that size looks fine for us. 7. Then the second part would be icon. We shall need for accounts to have its own part on it. So user, let's see, person, users. There is user and users, which we shall have for, I think users is better since it will have contain details of users for the administrator. Since the administrator is the only person who can access the backend, the administrator will need to have the settings available and look at the users, and then have the overview to look at their collection, the statistics of things happening, and then for the first and then pages right here. We can have pages right here, which is the main one, where the user can create pages for their website right there, because that's the main one. Then the other parts like the posts can be under collections here. And so let's see, this next one is going to be user. Let's look at this palette if there's anything. Oh, and media. So we should have media as well. That doesn't work. So gallery should do this. This photo should do, this library photo should look better. Library, which was called library photo. I think that should do justice for what we're doing. We made this 7 if I remember correctly, and yep, that worked. Let's see, stroke of 3, a stroke of 2, stroke of 3. Okay, I think we shall also go with stroke of 3, and we shall need to animate it so that it's kind of as if it is pushing out. Now for pages, let's see, what icon should we use for pages? Let's see, notes. I think notes works well. Icon notes, since basically they're like notes. So here we speed up this process, and since I decided to use stroke of 3, I'm going to also do that for that. And I think this first one is okay with that icon, because this is going to be our overview. So stroke of 3, and I think I should update the others before I forget that. Okay, since we wasted a lot of time on the explanation, now we want to hover, and they should have that nice hover effect on them. So what I'm going to do is have group here, in so that I don't have to define everything every single time, and just have, I'll say, group hover, and scale. Okay, that did that for me. Okay, let's see. Let me hope when I hover it doesn't hover all of them. Okay, it's hovering all of them. So we shall use the group somewhere else. Let's see if 20. I think we shall use the group form. Basically, let's see. Let me try to increase this to something much larger. Okay, I think this feels much better. I think so. So we shall scale them to 140, and then also add a way to add opaque. Use group hover to add opacity to the other icons. When one is hovered, the others have to have an opacity to them. So shall have it at 85, 55, 55. So when hovered, group hover, there's something I'm forgetting, but I think I'll remember that and figure out later on, because when hovered, I don't think all of them should do that. But I'll remember why. I'll remember what exactly I'm forgetting about the group hover part of it. But you get the idea that I'm trying to make. But since we have these hovers, no one can really know what these buttons actually mean, because I mean they're just buttons. They have icons on them, and the icons are based on my preferences. They don't really have any information about them. That's where we go back to shadcn and look for tooltip, which will help us when someone hovers on them. It will give them a tooltip on what that is. So when we come back here, and let me just hope I did actually add shadcn to this project, because I kind of forgot if I added it, but hopefully I did. Let's hope that as well. Okay, I did add that. Yep, I did. Okay, as that downloads, let me just close this. Don't need that at the moment for reference. So we shall take this example, come back here, and add it right here. And then as we add it, we shall create our menu items themselves. Create our menu items, which will be mostly This is going to be overview, which is supposed to be the first page that appears when you reach at admin. Then this will be pages. This will be storage. Okay, yeah, let's name it as storage or buckets, and then users and settings, which is quite that. So in order for me not to always try to write all this information over and over again, let's just define them up there and pass everything right here. The reason I prefer enclosing it like this in an object rather than enclosing it like this in a return value is because I can define more right here. I can easily define more of the information right here and do other inline. I can do other things right from inside here, so that's why I prefer defining it like this, but not in all cases. So we shall have our tooltip for each of our icons and give it the key of index, and then for our trigger, for the hover, we're going to add our buttons inside it, which takes our icon, and our icons have this information, which I think would have been better off just having the icon itself. Rather than having to define all of it here, since we are creating something that can be reused later on. Okay, not right now, obviously. This is not a good start for creating something reusable, but so yep, we have our two tips showing up here, and we can remove all these other parts that are not really important for us right now. And now we need to fix how this the two tips are being shown to us by adding this here. And yes, we need it to fit, but it already does that, so we don't really need that. And we shall add it to 58 so that it's above here, and then bottom of 5. That doesn't make sense. Neither that does that make sense to me? Because margin bottom. Okay, I'll figure out what exactly it is for this. Can't quite remember exactly how it's defined, but yep, now we can add actually. Okay, now we can add our label right here, so that it's easier for someone to know what kind of button is this label. Okay, which button it's for, what it's for, and here we can easily do reduction of certain things. Okay, I think this is much better. Duration. Okay, let's give it 4. think that's way better than before now. Okay, this seems much nice, and we should also add our path. Let's name it path rather than URL, and the path for this is admin itself. We don't need it to be anything else than that. Path pages, same thing here. Path buckets, and to have the path of users, to have the path of add settings. So we shall have this with settings and all that. Then in order for us to hover and have, because I wouldn't want to use instead of us using a const route of from use route next navigation, I think it would be best for us to just use link from next link itself and pass it along here as follows, and just add in Horace with, here we have path and path. And here we have it, so you can see each path, admin, this and that. So we have this. I prefer this kind of where I hover and have the information showing at the side of the path. So this simplifies everything up, which we shall bulk up improve on it, because right now it still looks raggedish or doesn't look that nice. So we have our settings, admin settings, shall have our admin bucket, admin users, admin pages, and right there. Okay, so up next on our design is bottom, on our, we shall have the header menu, let's call it header menu just for the sake of it. We shall rename it later on when we are restructuring most of our stuff, our code to look much better. So it's not going to really be a header menu itself, but as we saw from the design from our Figma design, from this, the design that I'm basing on right now, it's not really a design for this. I'm just, going along with what works. I'm just going along with it because it did look nice to me after when I was reviewing my designs on for some reason, I don't know why it's doing that. So we'd want it to show this and have basically the profile picture right here, and the username, and then some few information right there below it. So that's basically what this header is going to be for, this header. So talking about the header, top 5, bottom 5, is it really? Okay, I think that works for us, and okay, yep, that works for me. And okay, this is not something we want here. So for this, it won't have any background, no blur, no rounded sides, just straight up items center, and that's about it. And then when it comes to inside here, rather than groups, we shall flex it, items center, and then justify between plus width full. So justify between and with full, and we shall have two parts inside right here. So class name shall have flex, okay, that, and then let's just have h1 with a path of admin, and then duplicate this, copy this, paste this here, and this other side we shall have our avatar, then have our avatar image itself, sorry, shouldn't have that, plus source of our image. I don't know if we have some images in our public directory. Okay, if we don't have one, we could pick one from right here. Okay, for now we can borrow Shotzian's library path, this icon, and then we add a fallback of PC. Okay, and that's where we are having an issue. So in our page centering, we're having that issue because this is pushing everything to the center without giving us some little bit of width within it. So what I'm going to do, let's see, this solves the issue, doesn't solve it at all. Okay, button can't be descendant of button, don't get it. I think this might come from here, where it says button can't be descendant of button, and okay, I guess so. No, that's not what I wanted. As child, and now button can be descendant of button. So for this I would like to get some little bit of context on this information. See, I want to know why isn't it working. Okay, not facing the same issues, so we shall fix that later on. For now, for acting as a fix, we can add that, and then rather than have the container outside, we can have it inside here, whereby it's inside already the fixed part of this side here, which has the container, and still the same issue. So the container is the issue itself, if I'm getting this correctly. Wait a minute. I thought the container was the issue itself, but probably not bad to be wrong about this. So let's see. Okay, I think the other side worked because we had this flex inside this side or something of a sort. Is it me or is it thing acting weird for me? Okay, we've flexed that and the height is feet, which doesn't affect that. And we have this, shouldn't be affected that much. But putting it as screen shouldn't also affect that as much. Shouldn't do anything really. And if I add auto, let me also do that for this. I think it's mostly due to the structure that I might have from here, which this is fine. This should work fine without any issues. And this shouldn't affect the code anyways. And because this is going to go back this side and so is this, but since we are designing it here, we just wanted something that follows up on that. So height full, and item center. So the height is full. To close that, flex that there. Okay, I think we shall figure that out. I'm tired of trying to figure this out right now. We shall figure this out later on. That's why it sucks to really code while recording. And since this is not really a whole, kind of brand of something like that, see, because there's a high possibility that the update I made didn't affect anything here. Nothing was affected there. But so basically, since this is just a simple template we're making that we shall refine, because this now in my eyes kind of looks a little rugdish and ugly. We shall refine that later on. Let's add it like this. Still doesn't fix that issue. And for some reason that fixes the issue. We wouldn't want this to look as big as that. So and I'm glad that we actually made it to a single structure, whereby we could actually lower it a little bit in size and also reduce on this, so it's a little bit better for us. I think 11 would be much better. Okay, yeah. 11 is better. And rather than that, Okay, that feels much better. And also, see, then we can just pad it too and give it some little bit of a shadow into that. I think here the shadow should be right there, not where we are. Okay, this should be okay for us, but this is way too far from where we would want it to be. It's good, but this is too far apart. See, this looks too far apart. I think we could reduce it to say 5, which, if I'm not getting it wrong, that means this did not work actually. And rather than that, this has its own issues to deal with. I think we talking on this. Okay, so that worked. So it worked, but again it did mess up with our so the justify from page was removed, so it won't be justifying itself to the center, hence. But again, this maximum width will mess with us a bit. Oh, this sucks. Now again, we have to create something of a sort like this in order to maintain that, though we shall be improving this. This is mostly for the sake of having to first come up with our design for this, and container is mostly, to my understanding, bringing all these issues. if I have someone to blame, it would be container, and this is the reason why I was blaming container for the whole thing. Now it's centered to my knowledge, at least I think so, and this would be link, but not yet at this point, because this is also still not there. We're just coming up with simpler design, just something simple for us to pass time by with it. And then we shall have, say, collections. So there's that, and then there's this. Now, most of these we shall design them. This is not supposed to be absolute to the top, and since these are going to be inside, this collection will actually be below this top part here, and it will still slide under it, but it will start from below right here, and it still slide below this. So for right now, let's just take it as it is, not minding what is there. And then we shall create let's just say collection dummy, which will have 1 to 10, just a simple dummy of collections. See, which this kind of has everything that we need, but shall have a div for this, and since we want it to flow, shall put them in columns, since it's not only one single item being put here. So we shall have another div right here, and in this div just give it a gap, shall make it a grid with a gap of 3, and inside it have header with the name collections, and right below that we shall have div with collection. Just take that grid as it is and do the mapping. Okay, follow that as it is, and we shall have our collections something of a kind like that, and then have something else right below it, say preferences, and right below it we shall have preferences, something of a sort, which we shall need to align correctly with what we have. The height doesn't really matter, so we shall have everything here. And since we have this right here, let me hide it for now, don't really need to see it, so that we can have the rest of this in the middle. So we shall have something of the sort, which will highlight this as the selected one. We shall have a different color for the current path for this, like we shall take it from path itself, path name, and use path name from navigation, this, which we shall, since we're going to have it as use client, and have the other parts of the pages, we shall need them to remain strictly as server, use server, and just pass in our client components from it. And here we shall have, we shall definitely define the path here, which equals to path. Okay, this is it, that does it, but that's not the kind of design I want. I would go with path and go more with I'll go more with border. Let's try to see if this comes out nice. Border radius, and then border decoration would be dashed. Did I even get this correctly? To my knowledge. Okay. I think last time it was 55, the opacity of the others. So let's put it at 45. And I don't know why the borders aren't working right here for some reason. So let's try this again with border 2dp and don't think I like that at all. Neither do I think I like this at all. But I think we shall get a better color because I would have preferred to have the primary color here. And the primary color I would have liked to have here is basically this. I think this is going to be the last part that I'm going to show in this video, and then we shall continue on from that in the next video. Either green or yellow would go for me. Rose red, orange, or yellow. I think I'll go for yellow, and since we're in Tailwind v4, shall use that. Route and dark, can't remove this, take this, and we shall take that as is. And yeah, I think I would like this more. Or else we could pick a different color. I think I've gotten too attached with yellow. I think we could go for green right now. Okay, could go for green right now. Okay, so I think we shall continue from here, and we shall implement a better structure whereby we shall redefine these parts into our we shall define them into our just a minute. Yep, we shall redefine these parts into a different segment. We shall either rename it to something else, because the slug itself is supposed to be under admin, and then we also have our auth right here, which is supposed to handle authentication in our admin panel. Though it would have been best to add layout inside here so that we can define these parts outside of this and then put everything inside as a child inside of the two of these. The head and then our bottom navigation itself, which would look nice really, and then also having it scrollable would be better, and also having this stick to the bottom right here, stick to the bottom and also stay to the bottom all the way. Yeah, thanks for watching. I think we shall continue here from the next video. I don't want this to be longer than before.